What's going on, you guys? It's your boy, the American F1 fan, Eric Ringle here, and we are back with more Drive to Survive as we're going to talk about episodes 6 through 10 of the series. So guys, spoiler alert, before the rest of this video goes on, there will be spoilers about what has happened in Drive to Survive. So if you don't want to hear those spoilers and you want to watch it for yourself, go ahead and click off this video and watch it afterwards, because I'm going to be giving my thoughts on episodes 6 through 10 of Drive to Survive. So episode 6, Wheels of Fortune, this is all about McLaren and their chase for the Constructors' Championship all throughout the season, but we started off in Hungary where, Oscar was able to get a really good start and he was able to get out into the lead. The team really screwed this one up. Pitted Lando first, which gave him a massive undercut. And then, once Oscar pitted, Lando was very far in front of him, and I felt like the team really was unfair to Lando here in the sense of that, he worked his way to get to the front of the field, even after the pit stops, had a great set of laps after his pit stop that put him in the position to get into the lead. And then Oscar obviously falls behind him. And then to play the guilt trip that team played on him the entire second half of that race, that was just, I really truly think that was the beginning of the turmoil within the team as far as, getting that Constructors' Championship. I think had they not won the Constructors' Championship this season, I think a lot of us would have looked back on Hungary and, just the way the team reacted to, trying to get Oscar back to the victory and, maybe some of the mistakes there. And the fact that in general, McLaren just never set, any guidelines until it was almost too late on who the true number one driver was and who the focus was going to be on. And I mean, that was all the way in Baku when they finally make that decision, and it was almost too late then to make a decision like that. And once Hungary happened and then he moved on to Monza, you could tell Lando Norris was still extremely upset for what occurred in Hungary, for the, just the constant, berating, if you could call it that, just the constant, hey, do this for the team, blah, 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 we know you'll do the right thing, basically playing this massive guilt trip on McLaren. I think you could clearly tell when they were getting the media together as far as how they were going to handle things, Lando was still extremely pissed off about Hungary. And rightfully so. I mean, he got to the front. Let's not play the guilt trip game. And, truly, I think had they lost the championship, that would have been the point you could have pointed back to and said, this is where McLaren really lost the championship. And then looking at some of the other things from this episode, one of the other things that stuck out to me, I've got notes here, by the way, I wrote down notes. One of the other things that I noticed in this episode was the team and crew were really puzzled by Oscar in that first lap move that he made into the chicane in Monza. They all knew who the true number one at the team was, but for some odd reason, Oscar, who I think has overly proved himself at McLaren as to be a really good race driver, I don't know if that move necessarily needed to be made. I think even Oscar would readily admit at that time that Lando had a chance at the championship, and so the team and the crew were all very puzzled about that move. But I think the one thing the Drive to Survive missed here was the mini DRS situation that occurred in Baku when, after the race was over, McLaren did get found to have a mini DRS system, and basically the FIA went back, changed the regulations to take that out so that there was no way that McLaren could use that as kind of a loophole. And we've seen it in a couple other episodes, and there's another episode something comes up that kind of brings to question about what Netflix was bringing up, but I'm really surprised that they didn't cover that at all in this episode. So episode 7, In the Heat of the Night, this is all about Singapore, but I think Netflix did a really cool thing here where we got a lot of behind the scenes, really got a lot of behind the scenes stuff with the drivers. Netflix gave Russell, Gasly, Leclerc, Albon, and Norris all phones that they could shoot video on. And so this episode, a lot of it, it was on the Netflix cameras, but we got to see a lot of cool moments, like where Russell and Albon were flying together when they were flying to Singapore. You got to see Norris and, before and after the race, talking about how he was going to be flying back with Verstappen. And so I thought we got some really cool moments in there. But I think one of the things that stuck out in my mind is all these five guys used to go-kart with each other. And Norris readily admits that the whole reason I think he's in Formula One to begin with is because of how good Albon was when he was a go-kart driver back when they were all kids. And I never knew that about how good that Albon really was at go-karting. We've seen that he's been good at both Red Bull and when it was Toro Rosso and AlphaTauri. We saw how good he was there. But we really didn't understand how good he was just as a kid and how much skill he truly had. And it was really cool to see that Norris pays some homage to Albon here and says, he's kind of the reason that I'm in Formula One. But I think the biggest thing that we saw in this episode, and it's one of those, yes, it's a reality TV show, but there's certain times where you probably need to stop recording and worry more about the person than necessarily the content that you're getting. And that is after the race in Singapore was over, George Russell, you could see some of the drivers were having some, massive heat issues, as Singapore does bring up from time to time. A lot of the guys losing a lot of sweat, losing a lot of weight throughout the race. But, when you started to walk with George through the paddock, you could clearly tell when he was first out of the car that something was not right with him. He looked very pale, almost white as a ghost. And it was even worse once he got into the ice bath. And his girlfriend was there with him, trying to console him. And immediately he says something doesn't feel right. And so they shut the door on him, but they got the microphone still going. And they're shooting literally the video right at the door as George Russell is hyperventilating, maybe going into, bits of heat stroke. We don't necessarily know, but I think there's a point in time where we have to sit here as fans of Formula One and, fans of the series in general. Yes, we want content, but is it really that big of a deal that we maybe shut the cameras off and try to help somebody that may be having a medical emergency? And I really thought this was poor timing on Netflix's part to sit there and choose to rather shoot video than to help George Russell and get the help that he needed to, really, overcome whatever it was he was going through, whether it was a panic attack, heat stroke, heat exhaustion, whatever it was. I think that's a time where we need to drop the cameras and worry about a driver's health. So episode 8, Elbows Out. This is all about Red Bull and their Constructors' Championship fight, but the fact that Checo is not carrying his weight at the team. And so we're going through kind of the team decision as far as Christian Horner goes, as far as who's going to get that second seat, if they're going to take, Checo out of there, who's going to get that second seat at Red Bull. We see the likes of Daniel Ricciardo and Liam Lawson. They played a huge part in this episode. Daniel's trying to fight his way back into the Red Bull main team, whereas Liam Lawson is trying to get into Formula One itself in general. But the one thing it really kind of explained it all when, we saw Christian Horner talking about it, was Yuki was never considered an option for that second driver's role at Red Bull. And you could clearly tell about how this episode was crafted and molded by Netflix and by Red Bull itself. They barely talked about Yuki at all. And it's really sad because Yuki took another big step forward for Visa Cash App Red Bull this last season, and he's been truly showing that he's got the talent that I think if you were to potentially put him in a Red Bull car, he may be able to perform. But, as we got to the Silverstone test that Liam takes part in, we don't see Yuki there to potentially get a chance at this. And yes, Liam runs very close to the same lap times as Max. He's about 2/10 off there, but I really truly feel for Yuki at Red Bull. And as we hear more and more coming out about, his situation at Red Bull and the junior team, you've got to really feel for Yuki and how Red Bull teams are treating him. And it's sad to see that he's just not getting the shot he so richly deserves. Now, one of the other things that this is my personal opinion about, this episode is you truly come to find out that Liam Lawson is truly an asshole. Watching this episode, yes, you're not there to make friends, but you're also there to not rock the boat literally 2 to 3 races in. I mean, Jesus, him and the fighting between him and Checo went so overboard. I'm really surprised that the FIA did not step in here and penalize Liam Lawson much further than they could have. I mean, the fact that Liam Lawson, going down the main straight where you're going 200 plus miles an hour, and he takes his hand off the steering wheel just to specifically flip off Checo Perez. And, and the way some of the moves that he was pulling throughout that race in Mexico was it was just downright disrespectful. And I've got to say, I'm hoping that Liam Lawson will have a much better 2025 and make me like him a little bit more. But just to the end of the 2024 season, and then when he gets announced for the Red Bull seat, God, Liam Lawson's a dick. So episode 9, under new management, we move on to Haas and Alpine and their fight for 6th in the constructor standings. First, we meet Ayo Komatsu, the new team principal at Haas, and then we meet Flavio Briatore, who's the new leader at Alpine. And these two guys could not be almost polar opposites. Ayo seems very happy-go-lucky, but he is very stern when he needs to be. He's not the cusser that Gunther Steiner used to be. He's not the guy that would literally yell and scream and holler and call his drivers idiots or wankers or whatever the case may be. He's not one of those guys, but he definitely shows passion when it definitely needed, when there were definite moments of passion that needed to be shown. But then you got Flavio, who's just, no frills. He's a blunt man. And it couldn't have been more clearer in this episode. And I think he was very blunt at the fact that he did not like Esteban Ocon. It is very clear to me watching this episode that Flavio had something out for Esteban Ocon this entire episode. It was getting to the point of almost like harassment to me. Like, it was just like any little problem that happened, like the spin out that Williams caused Esteban in Austin. Flavio gets mad at Esteban for that, like it was his fault. Like, it's clearly, if you watch the video, it's clearly Alex's fault, and Alex is the one that takes out Esteban Ocon in that move. But by looking at Flavio, you would think that Esteban literally just went into the corner specifically to spin out, and he got so upset by it. Now, granted, Gasly had an okay race, but like I didn't understand the hate that Flavio had for Esteban in this episode. We get to the likes of Las Vegas and Qatar, where both those incidents, Las Vegas, wasn't his fault. The team told him to box, and then the team wasn't ready for his pit stop. Like, that's not his fault. That is on your team, Flavio. That's on your team. And then, Qatar, he gets taken out by Nico Hulkenberg. As much as I'm a Haas homer, I'm going to still say Nico did take out Esteban in this instance. And, that's not on Esteban. Like, what do you want him to do in that situation? It was just so much hate from Flavio that it was borderline annoying. And I get it. Flavio, wants his guys there. And obviously, Pierre was his guy. He was wanting him to be one of his guys. But, like, it was amazing to see that amount of hate. And then one of the other things that I remembered from this episode is when Ocon finally signed for Haas. Even the Haas factory was questioning, why are we signing Ocon? And one of the things that Io says is that once he gets into, he thinks that this team is the best environment for Esteban, and he clearly told the factory that barring what we've seen from Esteban in the past, he truly believes that bringing Esteban in will make this team even greater. And it remains to be seen. We'll see it once the season gets underway. But it's a valid question that some of the people at Haas really brought up in this. And we find out that Jack Doohan gets the second seat besides Gasly just a little bit after Esteban signs. But one of the things that it's not necessarily creepy, but it's weird, is that, after Flavio gives Jack the contract, he basically says, I'm going to be in charge of your every move, every millimeter move in this paddock. I'm going to be in charge of it. It was just, it's scary because it's like you've just come into this team, and yes, you want to shake things up, but it's borderline, it's borderline to the point where Jack's got to be scared for his job, and especially now that we know that he's only signed for the first 5 races, and they've brought Franco Colapinto in as a reserve driver. This team is all sorts of shambles, and I don't know who would want to be a part of this team in the future, but, obviously, Esteban fought for this team. It showed, I think, in Brazil. He fought for Alpine as much as he could, getting that second place and really, solidifying their 6th place finish in the constructor standings. He didn't want to give up the fight. And the fact that Flavio sat him with 1 race to go and the way they did it just seemed really, really shitty. So episode 10, Endgame, we get a recap of the prior 9 episodes and everything, every news story that we saw, minus a couple ones that Netflix decided to keep out. But, we saw a recap of the prior 9 episodes and the fight for all the positions within the constructor standings between the likes of McLaren, Ferrari, and Red Bull. You had the fight between Alpine and Haas. It was a really good episode here, just, seeing the last couple of races and seeing that fight for the constructor standings. One of the things that, you can tell Max is just, he has a do not give a shit attitude when it comes to, what he does on the track. The fact of what he did in Mexico, where he literally took out Lando twice during this race, he didn't care. He wasn't sorry, which I get. As a driver, you can't, look back with any regrets as far as, what occurs in a race. But, you would have thought that, somebody in the media team would have talked to Max and been like, yeah, probably should apologize for what you did in Mexico. And it sounded really odd when they did the driver's interview. I think it was in Brazil, about that, and the fact that he just was not sorry for what he did. Brazil, to me, and I marked this down because as I was watching the clips back, Brazil was dangerous. I got to be honest, I'm a little shocked that Brazil actually went on, because, some of the things that we saw during that race, I was scared for the drivers. Now, granted, we all love to see them race in the rain if we can, but I think this was way past the point of trying to, put on a competitive race, where much more we were just trying to get a race in it. And almost to a certain extent seemed like Belgium, but like they went further in actually running the race, which was, I think, very concerning and very dangerous. We saw it all throughout qualifying and throughout the race, just the amount of water on that track. Like, there were guys that were legitimately scared for their life during that race, and I don't blame them. I truly am surprised that the FIA decided to run that race. Going to the end of the episode, obviously McLaren wins the Constructors' Championship, and Zach Brown is a bit of a troll himself, and he gets over the radio and tells Lando Norris that, it was simply lovely, and that seems to be a ever-going theme throughout this episode, is using that phrase, simply lovely, and Christian overhears it, and then Christian says Zach is so annoying. But then I wrote down in my notes, I said Christian is so annoying, because, like, at that point I thought he was just being a sore loser, but because, like, you guys were throwing it around all season. You guys were shooting it back and forth between drivers, and it was one of those that, like, it's the phrase of the season. Like, Zach wanted to get one last parting shot, which is why I called him a troll. But, like, Christian Horner is, like, constantly is calling Zach names, saying he's annoying, calling him a prick, like all this other stuff, and quite frankly, it's not needed. But I do love to see the rivalry, though, between Christian Horner and Zach Brown. I can't wait to see how it turns out in 2025 and to see just those two going at it again this season. But guys, let me know what you guys thought of Drive to Survive. I'm going to have another video talking about my likes and dislikes just of the series in general and what Netflix did. So be on the lookout for that. And we are in race week. Australian Grand Prix is coming up this weekend, so we'll have the live stream for that. It'll be the first ever live stream of the season for that. So you guys will want to join me for that. Guys, slap a like on this video if you guys like Drive to Survive and you want to get this out to more and more Drive to Survive fans. If you guys are new to my channel, please hit that subscribe button. We are on a race to 1,000. If we can get to 1,000 this year, it would be absolutely amazing. So please help me out and hit that subscribe button. But guys, thank you so much for watching this video. And guys, for the American F1 fan, I'm Eric Ringel, signing off.